December 1944, Belgium. 12 dead tanks. 600 surrounded men. 1 mechanic with a wrench. Officers debated surrender. Turner planned miracles. Let me take you back to how it started, because you need to understand what kind of man Joe Turner was before that night in the Ardennes. He wasn't your typical Army hero. No West Point ring. No family military tradition. No dreams of glory. Joe Turner was a mechanic from Akron, Ohio, the kind of guy who could hear what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it idle, who'd been taking apart cars and tractors since he was 12 years old. When the draft notice came in 1942, he figured the Army would put him in the motor pool, and that's exactly what happened. They made him a mechanic in the 3rd Armored Division, and Turner was fine with that. He liked machines better than people anyway. Machines made sense. Machines didn't panic. Machines just needed someone who understood them. By December 1944, Turner had been in Europe for 6 months. He'd landed at Normandy in late June, after the initial invasion, and had been following the armor units across France ever since. His job was simple: keep the tanks running. While other guys got medals for heroism, Turner got quietly satisfaction from coaxing another 50 miles out of a transmission that should have died 30 miles ago. The tank crews loved him. They'd bring their Shermans in coughing and sputtering, and Turner would disappear underneath them for a few hours, and somehow, impossibly, those tanks would roll again. He didn't talk much, didn't have to. His work spoke for itself. The thing about Sherman tanks, and this is important to understand what Turner was up against, is that they were reliable machines but not invincible. The M4 Sherman was the workhorse of the American armor. 30 tons of steel powered by a 9-cylinder Continental radial engine that put out 400 horsepower. It could do 30 miles per hour on good roads, less in mud or snow. The main gun was a 75 mm that could handle most German tanks at medium range, though the newer German Panthers and Tigers could punch through Sherman armor like paper. The Sherman's real advantage was numbers and reliability. For every Panther Germany built, America built 5 Shermans. And when a Sherman broke down, a good mechanic could fix it with parts cannibalized from other tanks. That adaptability, that mechanical simplicity, that's what Turner understood in his bones. The battle that trapped Turner's battalion started on December 16, 1944. Hitler had launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, Operation Watch on the Rhine, throwing 21 divisions against a thinly held American line. The goal was to split the Allied forces, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The Americans called it the Battle of the Bulge because of how the German attack created a massive bulge in the Allied lines. The weather was brutal. Temperatures dropped below freezing. Snow and fog grounded the Allied Air Force, which meant the German armor could move without getting hammered from above. It was chaos. Entire American units were cut off, surrounded, or simply shattered by the German assault. Turner's battalion was part of the 3rd Armored Division's reserve, positioned near a small Belgian crossroads town called Marche. On December 21st, they got orders to move east and hit the German flank. The battalion had 16 Sherman tanks, 600 men, and orders to hold a section of the perimeter road that German forces were using to move supplies. It should have been a straightforward mission. Take position, dig in, wait for reinforcements. But the German advance was faster and deeper than anyone expected. By the time Turner's battalion reached their position on the afternoon of December 22nd, German forces had already moved past them. They were cut off. The first German attack came at dusk, panzers and infantry hitting from 2 sides at once. The American tanks fought hard, and for a while they held. Turner wasn't in a tank. He was with the maintenance section, 3 half-tracks carrying spare parts and tools, positioned behind the main line in a cluster of stone farm buildings. He could hear the battle, but couldn't see much through the snow and smoke. The radio chatter told the story. Tanks getting hit, crews bailing out, the distinctive whump of German 88mm guns, the sharper crack of American 75s firing back. It went on for 3 hours. When the shooting finally stopped and the German forces pulled back, the battalion had held their position, but the cost was steep. 4 Shermans were completely destroyed, burning hulks that couldn't be saved. 8 more were damaged, tracks blown, engines shot up, turrets jammed. Only 4 tanks were still operational, and one of those was running on 3 cylinders. That night, December 22nd, the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, a thin-faced West Pointer from Virginia, called his officers together. Turner was there because the senior maintenance officer, Captain Reeves, wanted him to explain the mechanical situation. The scene was grim. The officers were gathered in the farmhouse basement, maps spread out on a wooden table, a single kerosene lamp casting shadows. Harrison looked 10 years older than his 32 years. His voice was steady, but you could hear the strain. "Gentlemen," he said, "we're surrounded. Radio contact with division is intermittent. We've got maybe 500 rounds of 75mm ammunition left. Food for 2 more days if we ration strictly. And according to Sergeant Turner here, we've got 4 tanks that can still fight." Captain Reeves cleared his throat. He was a decent officer, but he didn't really understand mechanics the way Turner did. "Sir, technically we have 12 tanks. 8 are damaged, but potentially repairable. The problem is time and parts. Under normal circumstances, with a full maintenance section and a week in a rear depot, we could get maybe 6 of them running again. But here, now, with limited parts and no specialized tools—" He trailed off. The implication was clear. They were screwed. Harrison looked at Turner directly. "Sergeant, what's your assessment?" Turner wasn't used to being put on the spot in officer meetings. He took a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Sir, the captain's right about normal circumstances. But this isn't normal. I've been looking at those tanks. Most of them, the damage isn't as bad as it looks. We've got 3 with thrown tracks. That's maybe 4, 5 hours of work each if we had the manpower. 2 with engine problems that I think I can fix if I can pull parts from the total losses. 1 with a jammed turret that just needs the ring gear replaced. The problem isn't whether they can be fixed. The problem is we'd need 3 days and no incoming fire to do it right." One of the younger officers, a lieutenant named Kowalski, spoke up. "So what you're saying is it's impossible." Turner looked at him with those steady gray eyes. "No, sir, I'm saying it's impossible to do it right. Doing it at all, that's different." Harrison leaned forward. "Explain." Turner pointed at the map. "We're in a box, sir. Germans on 3 sides, and based on the radio traffic, they're bringing up more forces. They'll hit us again tomorrow, probably at dawn. If we only have 4 tanks when they come, we're not going to hold. But if I can get even 3 more tanks operational by morning, that changes the math. 7 tanks with good fields of fire can hold a perimeter. It's not impossible." The room was quiet for a moment. Finally, Harrison said, "How many men do you need?" Turner thought about it. "Normally, I'd say a full maintenance crew, maybe 15 men. But most of that's for the heavy lifting and the detail work. If I'm just trying to get tanks running, not pretty, I can do it with 3 good men and whatever infantry you can spare for muscle when we need to move heavy components." Captain Reeves looked skeptical. "Sergeant, even with help, working in the dark, in the snow, with Germans shelling our position, you really think you can salvage 3 more tanks by dawn?" Turner didn't hesitate. "Ah, sir, I don't know if I can, but I know what happens if I don't try." That's when Lieutenant Colonel Harrison made the decision that would save 600 lives. He looked around the room at his officers, at the maps showing their impossible situation, and then back at Turner. "All right, Sergeant, you've got carte blanche. Take whatever men you need, whatever equipment you need. The infantry will keep the Germans off your back as long as they can. You have until dawn. That's roughly 9 hours. Get me 3 tanks. Turner nodded. "Yes, sir." He turned to go, but Harrison called him back. "Sergeant, I want you to understand something. If you can't do this, it's not on you. We're in a bad spot because of strategic decisions way above any of our pay grades. If we have to surrender tomorrow, that's on me, not you. Clear?" Turner's face didn't change expression. "Sir, I'm not thinking about surrender. I'm thinking about transmissions and track pins and how fast I can pull a cylinder head. With respect, you worry about the Germans. I'll worry about the tanks." Turner walked out of that farmhouse into the freezing Belgian night with 3 volunteer mechanics: Corporal Eddie Matsumoto from Los Angeles, Private First Class James Red O'Shea from Boston, and Private Billy Crawford from rural Georgia. Eddie was the best welder Turner had ever seen. Steady hands that could lay a perfect bead even when shells were falling. Before the war, he'd worked in his uncle's shop in Little Tokyo, dreamed of opening his own place someday. Red O'Shea talked fast, thought faster, could trace an electrical problem through a tank's wiring harness like reading a book. He had 3 sisters back in Southie and wrote them every week. Billy Crawford was 19, strong as an ox, quiet unless you got him talking about farming. Then he'd go on for hours about soil composition and crop rotation. He'd left his family's farm in the hands of his younger brother and his mama, promised to come home and help with the spring planting. They were all good men, all experienced, but none of them had Turner's instinctive understanding of how machines worked. Turner gathered them in one of the stone barns that the maintenance section had taken over, their breath fogged in the cold air. Someone had scrounged a couple of Coleman lanterns that threw harsh white light across the tools and parts scattered around. "Here's the situation," Turner said, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. "We've got 12 dead or dying tanks out there. Command needs 3 more operational by dawn to have any chance of holding this position. That's 9 hours to do work that should take 3 days. We're not going to do it right. We're not going to do it by the book. We're going to do field expedient repairs that would make any maintenance inspector lose his mind, and we're going to use parts from wrecked tanks to fix damaged ones. Matsumoto, you're the best welder we've got. O'Shea, you know electrical systems better than anyone. Crawford, you're strong as an ox and you follow orders. Questions?" Red O'Shea raised his hand. "Sarge, we're going to be working out in the open. Germans have the high ground to the east. They've been dropping mortars on us all evening. How are we supposed to work when we're getting shelled?" It was a fair question. Turner had been thinking about it. "We work by moonlight when we can, no lanterns outside. When they start shelling, we take cover until it stops, then we get back to work. It's going to be stop and start. That's why we need to be efficient with every minute we've got." Matsumoto spoke up, his voice quiet. "Which tanks are we working on, Sarge?" Turner had already scouted all 12 damaged tanks and made his mental triage. "Tank 31. She threw both tracks, but the running gear looks intact. If we can get tracks back on and tensioned, she'll move. That's our first priority because it's mostly mechanical work." Tank 47 took an 88 round through the engine compartment, but it went clean through without hitting anything critical. Lost the number 2 cylinder head and some oil lines. We pull parts from Tank 22, which is burned out, and we can patch her up. Tank 53, turret traverse is jammed because the ring gear is chewed up. We've got a spare ring gear from one of the write-offs. That's a 4-hour job under good conditions, but we're not going to have good conditions. Crawford scratched his head. Sarge, that's only 3 tanks. What about the others? Turner nodded. 4 more are possible, but lower priority. If we get time after these 3, we'll reassess, but 3 is the mission. Let's move. They went to work. The first tank was 31, a Sherman that had been immobilized when both tracks had been blown off by a German mine or a near miss from artillery. Nobody was quite sure. She was sitting in a slight depression about 100 yards from the stone buildings, canted at an angle. The track sections lay in twisted heaps on either side. In daylight, with a full crew and proper equipment, replacing tracks was maybe a 3-hour job per side. In the dark, in the snow, with occasional mortar rounds dropping randomly across the area, it was going to take longer. Turner and his crew reached the tank and immediately encountered the first problem. The left track section was partially buried under frozen earth kicked up by the explosion. They were going to need infantry with shovels to dig it out. Turner sent Crawford back to get help while he, Matsumoto, and O'Shea started assessing the right side. The track pins, the heavy steel pins that connected the individual track links together, had to be driven out and then replaced once the track was positioned. In the maintenance depot, they had hydraulic tools for this. Here, they had sledgehammers, pry bars, and brute strength. By midnight, they had 20 infantry guys helping with the digging and heavy lifting. The men worked in shifts because it was brutally cold, and you couldn't maintain body heat if you stayed still too long. Turner worked continuously, moving between tasks, directing the effort. Billy Crawford was down in the frozen mud, wrestling with the track section. "Sarge," he grunted. "This reminds me of pulling a tractor out of a drainage ditch back home. Except the tractor wasn't trying to kill me and I wasn't freezing my ass off." "Yeah, but did the tractor have a 75-millimeter gun?" Red O'Shea called from the other side of the tank. "That's the difference between farming and tanking, farm boy." "The tractor had my daddy yelling at me," Billy shot back. "That's scarier than any German gun." Turner allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Good. They were tired but not broken. Fear and exhaustion you could manage as long as men could still crack jokes. He'd located the track pins, realized half of them were bent or broken, and sent Matsumoto back to the burnout Tank 22 to salvage usable pins from its carcass. Eddie returned 20 minutes later, arms loaded with pins. "Got 18 good ones, Sarge. Tank 22's a total loss, but her pins are solid." "That'll do. Billy, Red, get over here. We're going to do this the hard way." Red wiped his nose with the back of his glove. "Is there an easy way I don't know about?" "Yeah," Turner said. "Having a maintenance depot, proper tools, and daylight. Since we don't have any of that, we improvise." While Matsumoto was gone, Turner and O'Shea worked on getting the right track positioned. This was precision work. The track had to be laid out straight, end pins aligned with the drive sprocket and the rear idler wheel, tension just right. Too loose and the track would throw again. Too tight and you'd burn out the final drive. Around 1 a.m., the Germans started shelling again. You could hear the hollow thump of the mortars firing from somewhere in the darkness, then the whistle of incoming rounds, then the crump of explosions. Some were far off. Some were close enough to shower the men with frozen dirt and snow. Then one hit maybe 15 yards away, and the blast wave knocked Billy Crawford flat. Eddie Matsumoto, who'd been standing on the tank, went flying off and landed hard on his shoulder. Turner, who'd been underneath the tank working on the left track, felt the concussion through the frozen ground like a giant had stomped next to his head. His ears rang. For a moment, he couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched whine. "Cover!" somebody screamed, but Turner's ears were still ringing, and it sounded like it was coming from underwater. He tried to crawl out from under the tank, but his left hand wasn't working right. He'd smashed it against something when the blast hit. More mortars were falling now, a whole barrage, and men were scrambling for cover anywhere they could find it. Eddie was lying in the snow, not moving. Turner's heart dropped into his stomach. He crawled toward the corporal, ignoring the pain in his hand, ignoring the whistling of more incoming rounds. "Eddie! Eddie!" Matsumoto groaned and lifted his head. Blood was running down from his hairline where he'd hit the ground. I'm good," he mumbled, though he clearly wasn't. "Shoulders messed up, but I'm good." "The hell you are." Turner grabbed Eddie's gear and dragged him toward the cover of Tank 31's hull. Billy Crawford materialized out of the darkness, picked up Eddie like he weighed nothing, and carried him the rest of the way. They huddled against the tank's side while mortars rained down for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. When it stopped, Turner's hands were shaking. Not from the cold this time. From the realization that they'd been maybe 5 seconds away from dying. "Everybody okay?" Turner's voice came out rougher than he intended. "Define okay," Red O'Shea said from somewhere in the darkness. "I just pissed myself a little. But other than that, I'm fantastic." Despite everything, Billy let out a choked laugh. "Jesus, Red." "What? I'm being honest. That was the scariest thing that's happened since I got to this goddamn continent." Red's voice was shaking, but he was trying to joke through it. "Oh, that was good. You could work with scared. You couldn't work with paralyzed." Eddie sat up slowly, touching his head. "I can still weld. Shoulders banged up, but I can still weld." "You sure?" Turner asked. "Sarge, my uncle taught me to weld when I was 12. I could do it blind drunk with one arm if I had to. A sore shoulder ain't stopping me." Eddie's voice was steady now, scared, but steady. Turner looked at his crew, really looked at them. They were terrified. They were exhausted. Billy had a cut on his face from flying debris. Red's hands were trembling. Eddie was bleeding from a head wound. And they were all looking at him, waiting to see what he'd do. If he quit, they'd quit. If he got back to work, they'd get back to work. It was that simple. "All right," Turner said quietly. "We've got 8 hours left. Let's get back to it." They went back to work. By 2 a.m., they had the right track on Tank 31. The left track took another hour and a half because the track pins Matsumoto had salvaged from Tank 22 didn't quite match. They were from an earlier production run with slightly different dimensions. Turner made them work anyway, using a combination of precise hammering and creative profanity. At 3:30 a.m., with the sky still black as pitch, Turner climbed into Tank 31's driver position and fired up the engine. The Continental radial engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with that distinctive 9-cylinder sound. The track began to move. Turner eased the tank forward 10 feet, then back, testing the tracks under load. They held. The tank was mobile. 1 down, 2 to go. 5.5 hours left until dawn. Tank 47 was the next priority. She'd taken a German round straight through the engine compartment. You could see the entry hole on the left rear and the exit hole on the right. By some miracle, the round had passed through without hitting the transmission or the main engine block. What it had destroyed was the number 2 cylinder head, several oil lines, and the electrical wiring harness. This was going to be more technically complex than the track work. Turner needed to essentially rebuild part of the engine while it was still mounted in the tank. The smell hit them first. Burned oil, melted rubber insulation from the wires, and underneath it all, the sharp, metallic scent of torn steel. Turner climbed up onto Tank 47's engine deck and opened the access panels. Even in the darkness, he could see the damage. "Jesus," Red O'Shea muttered, looking over his shoulder. "That round went right through the heart of her." "Not quite," Turner said, running his hands over the engine block. His fingers found the smooth metal, untouched by the shell. "If it had hit 6 inches to the left, we'd have a cracked block and this whole tank would be scrap, but it missed. We can work with this." They pulled the damaged cylinder head, Eddie using his cutting torch. The bright flame threw dancing shadows across the snow. Turner felt the heat on his face, the only warmth he'd felt in hours. His hands were so cold they'd gone past hurting into something worse, a dull ache that went all the way to the bone. When he picked up metal tools, they stuck to his skin. When he pulled them away, they left blood on the steel. "Sarge," Eddie said, his breath fogging as he worked the torch, "you ever think about what we're doing here?" "Like, really think about it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're out here in the middle of nowhere, freezing our asses off, putting tanks back together with spit and baling wire. Any normal mechanic would say this is impossible. But we're doing it anyway. Why? Because some officer said we should?" Turner was quiet for a moment, watching Eddie's torch cut through a seized bolt. "You know why you weld, Eddie?" "Because I'm good at it." "That's part of it, but the real reason is because when you weld 2 pieces of metal together, right, they're stronger than they were before. The joint is actually stronger than the original metal. That's what we're doing here. These tanks are broken. We're making them whole again. Strong enough to protect the guys inside. That's why." Eddie nodded slowly. "My uncle used to say something like that. He'd say, 'Every weld you make, someone's counting on it to hold.' I never really got it until now." "Your uncle sounds like a smart man. He was. I don't know if he made it through the camps or not." Eddie's voice got quiet. "I haven't heard from him since 42. Sent to Manzanar, then I lost track. I keep thinking maybe when this war's over I'll find out he's okay." Turner didn't know what to say to that. What could you say? So he just put his hand on Eddie's shoulder for a moment, then went back to work. Sometimes that was all you could do. Meanwhile, Turner and Red were at Tank 22, pulling the number 2 cylinder head off its dead engine. The tank was a burned-out shell, but its engine parts were still good. "This feels wrong," Red said as he disconnected coolant lines. "Like we're robbing graves or something." "We're salvaging parts," Turner corrected. "This tank's done, but her parts can save other tanks. Save the guys in those tanks." "Yeah, I know. Still feels weird." Red wrestled with a stubborn bolt. "Sarge, can I ask you something?" "My sisters keep writing me, asking when I'm coming home. I don't know what to tell them. How do you explain this? How do you make them understand what it's like out here?" Turner thought about it. "You don't. They can't understand unless they've been here. And you don't want them to understand, because that would mean they'd have to go through what we're going through. You just tell them you're doing your job and you'll be home when the job's done." "That's what I've been saying. But it feels like a lie, you know? Like I'm leaving out all the real parts. The real parts are for us to carry, Red. Not them. That's the deal. We carry this so they don't have to." Turner finally got his bolt free, and the cylinder head started to come loose. "Hand me that pry bar." The cylinder head weighed about 40 pounds. In normal circumstances, you'd use a hoist to lift it. They had no hoist. Turner and Red manhandled it off the engine block, their arms shaking from the weight, their hands screaming in protest. They carried it across the frozen ground to Tank 47, stumbling in the darkness, and somehow managed to lift it up onto the engine deck without dropping it. "I'm getting too old for this shit," Red gasped. "You're 23, Turner said, "and I feel like I'm 50. This war's aging me, Sarge. It's aging all of us." At 4:15 a.m., they had the replacement cylinder head and were attempting to install it on Tank 47. This was delicate work. The head had to seat perfectly against the engine block with a new gasket. The torque on the head bolts had to be precise. Too loose and you'd blow the gasket. Too tight and you'd crack the casting. Turner's hands were shaking. Not from the cold. He'd stopped feeling the cold an hour ago. From exhaustion. From pain. From the slow realization that he might not actually be able to do this. He'd been working for 7 hours straight. His left hand, the one he'd smashed during the mortar attack, was swollen to twice its normal size. 3 fingers on his right hand had split open from the cold and were leaving blood smears on every tool he touched. And now, he was trying to do precision work that required steady hands and clear thinking. The wrench slipped. The bolt he'd been torquing spun free, stripped. "God damn it," Turner whispered. He'd just ruined a critical bolt. He'd have to drill it out, re-tap the hole, find another bolt. And that was another 30 minutes they didn't have. He looked at the eastern horizon. The sky was getting lighter. Dawn was coming, and he still had 2 more tanks to fix. No, 1 more, because he'd just screwed up this one, bad enough that maybe it couldn't be fixed in time. Turner sat down heavily on the frozen ground, still holding the wrench. For the first time all night, he let himself think about failure. 600 men were counting on him. 3 tanks weren't enough. 7 would give them a fighting chance. But he'd been stupid, pushed too hard, and now his body was giving out when they needed him most. The math was simple. If he couldn't get these tanks running, good men were going to die or spend the rest of the war in a German POW camp. And it would be because he wasn't good enough. "Sarge?" It was Billy Crawford's voice, quiet and concerned. The big Georgian sat down next to Turner in the snow. "You all right?" "Stripped a bolt," Turner said flatly. "That's 30 minutes we don't have, maybe more." Billy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My daddy used to tell me something when we'd be working the farm and things would go wrong. He'd say, 'Son, you can't plow a field by thinking about it. You just put the mule in front of the plow and start walking.' I never really understood what he meant until right now." Turner looked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means you can't fix 12 tanks by worrying about 12 tanks. You just fix the bolt in front of you. Then you fix the next bolt, then the next. 1 bolt at a time, Sarge. That's all any of us can do." Red O'Shea climbed down from where he'd been working on the electrical harness. "Billy's right. Also, Sarge, you've been working for 7 straight hours without a break. Eddie and I can handle this tank. You go work on 53. Different problem, fresh perspective. We'll finish this one." "You sure?" Turner asked. "Sarge," Eddie said, wincing as he moved his injured shoulder. "You taught me everything I know about these engines. I can torque a head bolts. Go." Turner stood up slowly. His legs didn't want to work right. Everything hurt. But Billy was right. You couldn't plow a field by thinking about it. You just had to put 1 foot in front of the other. "All right," he said. "You strip another bolt, you come get me. And Red, triple-check every electrical connection. I don't want this tank starting a fire." "Yes, sir, Sergeant, sir," Red said with a mock salute. "Now get out of here, before we start thinking you don't trust us." Turner walked toward Tank 53, and somewhere in that walk between the 2 tanks he found his second wind. or maybe his third or fourth, he'd lost count. His crew believed in him. More than that, they believed in what they were doing. That had to be enough. That's when they took another round of German mortar fire. And this time, it was close. A round hit maybe 30 yards away, and the concussion knocked O'Shea off the tank. He landed hard on the frozen ground, stunned but not seriously hurt. Turner didn't even look up from his work on the cylinder head. "O'Shea, you good?" Red groaned and climbed slowly to his feet. "Yeah, Sarge, I'm good." "Then get back up here. We don't have time for a break." By 5:30 a.m., the sky was starting to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. Turner had Tank 47's engine buttoned up and was hand-cranking it over to build oil pressure before starting. Matsumoto was finishing the last electrical connections. O'Shea was topping off fluids. Turner climbed into the driver's seat one more time, said a quick prayer to whatever god looked after mechanics, and hit the starter. The engine turned over once, twice, and caught. It ran rough. One cylinder was firing a bit late, and there was an oil leak they hadn't fully sealed, but it ran. Turner revved it up, listened to the sound, and nodded. It would hold. Maybe not for a long battle, but long enough to matter. 2 down, 1 to go. 90 minutes until full daylight. Tank 53 was the hardest job. The turret traverse mechanism was completely jammed because a German round had hit the turret ring at just the right angle to chew up the teeth on the ring gear. The turret could still elevate and depress, and the gun could fire, but it couldn't rotate. That made the tank a fixed gun emplacement instead of a proper fighting vehicle. To fix it, they needed to remove the entire turret, replace the damaged ring gear, and reinstall the turret. Under proper conditions with a crane and a full maintenance crew, this was an 8-hour job minimum. Turner had 90 minutes and no crane. "Here's what we're going to do," Turner said to his exhausted crew. They'd been working for 9 straight hours in sub-freezing temperatures under sporadic fire. Any sane person would have quit. But these were tankers and mechanics, and their battalion was counting on them. "We're not removing the whole turret. We're going to jack up the turret just enough to slide out the damaged ring gear section and slide in a new one." Billy Crawford looked at the tank, then at Turner, then back at the tank. "Sarge, please tell me we're not doing what I think we're doing." "It's going to be sketchy as hell," Turner continued. "There's a good chance the turret will slip and crush whoever's underneath. I'm going under. You 3 are on the jacks." "The hell you are," Eddie Matsumoto said, stepping forward despite his injured shoulder. "Sarge, with all respect, you've been working for 8 straight hours. Your hands are torn up. You're exhausted. If anyone's going under that turret, it should be someone whose reflexes aren't shot." "My reflexes are fine," Turner said. "Bullshit," Red O'Shea said quietly. "Sarge, we all saw you almost drop that wrench an hour ago. Your hands are barely working. You go under that turret and something goes wrong, you won't be able to get out fast enough." Turner looked at his crew. They were right. He knew they were right. But this was his job, his responsibility. "I'm not asking any of you to risk your life for this." "You're not asking," Billy said. "We're volunteering." "But here's the thing, Sarge. You're the only one who knows exactly how that ring gear fits. You need to be up top, directing us, ready to pull whoever's down there out if things go bad." "I'll go under." "Billy, you don't have to. My daddy taught me you don't let your friends do the dangerous work alone. Besides, I'm the strongest one here. If I need to push that turret off me, I got the best chance." Billy's voice was steady, but Turner could see the fear in his eyes. "I can do this, Sarge. Trust me." Turner wanted to argue, wanted to say this was his job, his burden to carry. But Billy was right. If something went wrong, Turner needed to be up top where he could react. "All right," he said finally. "But Billy, you don't take any chances. You feel anything shift, you get out. You hear me? I don't care if the job's half done, you get out." "Yes, sir." They positioned 4 hydraulic jacks around the base of the turret. Infantry guys brought more jacks from the maintenance supplies. The turret on an M4 Sherman weighs about 10 tons. The jacks were rated for 5 tons each, but that was on level ground with proper placement. This was frozen, uneven mud with improvised placement. Turner laid out boards to distribute the weight, positioned the jacks as carefully as he could in the darkness. His hands were shaking, from cold, from exhaustion, from fear for Billy. "All right," Turner said, his voice steady even though his hands weren't. "Slow and even. Red, you call the rhythm. Eddie, you and the infantry match Red's count. Billy, you tell us the second anything feels wrong. Clear?" "Clear," they all said together. "Start pumping," Red said. 1, 2, 3, 4. The jacks began to rise, each one pumping in rhythm. The turret lifted a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, an inch. The metal groaned. Billy slid underneath with a pry bar and the replacement ring gear section they'd pulled from Tank 19. Turner watched from above, his heart pounding. He could see Billy working in the narrow space, using the pry bar to lever out pieces of the damaged ring gear. Every few seconds, Turner would call down, "You good, Billy?" And Billy would call back, "I'm good, Sarge." But his voice was tight with fear. 10 minutes in, one of the jacks started to slip. Turner saw it, saw the turret shift maybe a 1/16 of an inch. "Stop!" he screamed. "Billy, get out now!" Billy didn't argue. He rolled out from under the turret fast, and not a second too soon. The jack tilted, lost purchase, and the turret dropped that 1/16 of an inch with a metallic crunch. If Billy had still been under there, his head would have been right where the turret came down. They all stood there for a moment, breathing hard. Billy's face was white. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Turner's hands were shaking so bad he had to clench them into fists. "That's it. We're done. This isn't worth—" "No," Billy said, cutting him off. "No, Sarge, we're not quitting now. We just need to reposition that jack." He looked at Turner, and despite the fear in his eyes, his voice was firm. I'm going back under, but first, let's fix that jack. Billy, Sarge, how many guys are in Baker Company? How many guys are counting on us right now?" Billy didn't wait for an answer. "I'm not letting them down because I'm scared. You taught me that. You've been working scared all night, haven't you? But you kept going. So I'm going back under." Turner looked at this kid from Georgia, 19 years old, scared out of his mind but refusing to quit, and felt something crack in his chest. "All right," he said quietly, "but we do it right this time. Eddie, get me 2 more boards. Red, help me reposition this jack. We're not taking any more chances." It took another 45 minutes. Billy went back under that turret, and Turner watched every second, ready to drag him out at the first sign of trouble. Billy worked with steady hands, levering out the damaged ring gear pieces, sliding in the new sections, securing them with whatever bolts he could reach. When he finally crawled out, both of them were drenched in sweat despite the freezing cold. "Lower it down," Turner called out, "slow and easy." The jacks descended. The turret settled onto the ring. Turner held his breath, waiting to see if the new ring gear would seat properly or if the whole thing would bind up. The turret settled with a metallic clunk. Billy climbed onto the tank, dropped into the commander's hatch, and grabbed the turret traverse control. He tested it. The turret rotated left, right. "It works, Sarge." His voice cracked with relief and exhaustion. "It works." Turner leaned against the side of the tank, his legs suddenly unable to hold him up. They'd done it. 3 tanks in 9 hours. It shouldn't have been possible, but they'd done it anyway. 3 tanks, 9 hours. Done with 15 minutes to spare before full daylight. But Turner wasn't finished. The sky was getting lighter. You could hear increased activity from the German positions. Engines starting, commands being shouted in German, the clank of tank tracks. The attack was coming soon. Turner looked at the other damaged tanks sitting in the morning twilight. He looked at his crew. Crawford, get Tank 31 moved into position. Colonel Harrison will tell you where he wants it. Matsumoto, same with 47. O'Shea, fuel and ammunition check on 53, then get her positioned. The 3 men moved to obey, too exhausted to question. Turner walked over to Tank 16, another damaged Sherman. This one had thrown a track and had a busted final drive. He'd said 3 tanks by dawn. He'd delivered 3 tanks by dawn. But there were still 6 hours of darkness left before the Germans would likely attack. Maybe he could get one more. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison found Turner 40 minutes later, elbow deep in Tank 16's final drive assembly. "Sergeant Turner," Harrison said, his voice carrying both respect and concern. "You've done enough. Your 3 tanks are in position. You need to get warm and get some food." Turner didn't look up from his work. "Sir, I can get this one running too. Another 2 hours, maybe less. That would give you 8 tanks instead of 7. Harrison put his hand on Turner's shoulder. "Sergeant, look at your hands." Turner looked down. His hands were a mess. Split skin, dried blood, fingers swollen from the cold. He'd lost feeling in 2 fingers on his left hand. Harrison continued, "You've done what you said you'd do and more. If you keep pushing, you're going to injure yourself permanently. I need you alive and functional, not crippled from frostbite and exhaustion. That's an order. Get inside, get warm, and get some rest. If the Germans break through today, it won't be because you didn't do your job." Turner wanted to argue, but he could barely stand. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. He started walking toward the farmhouse, then stopped and turned back. "Sir, those 3 tanks, they're not perfect. The repairs are field expedient. Tank 31's left track is going to need retentioning after about an hour of movement. Tank 47's engine is going to burn oil and might overheat if pushed too hard. Tank 53's turret traverse will work, but don't force it. Treat them gentle and they'll get you through the day." Harrison nodded. "I'll make sure the crews know. Now, get inside before I have my MPs drag you." Turner made it to the farmhouse, into the basement where they'd set up the aid station. The medic took one look at his hands and started working on them, cleaning wounds, bandaging fingers, checking for frostbite. Turner let him work. He was so tired he couldn't think straight anymore. Someone brought him hot coffee and a K ration. He ate mechanically, not tasting anything. Then he found a corner, sat down with his back against the stone wall, and was asleep within seconds. He woke to the sound of artillery. The German attack had started. Turner checked his watch. 8:30 a.m. He'd been asleep for less than 2 hours. The bombardment was heavy, shells screaming overhead and exploding across the American perimeter. Then came the tanks. Through the small basement window, Turner could see them, German Panzer IVs and at least 2 Panthers, advancing through the snow with infantry support. The American tanks opened fire. The sound was deafening even in the basement. The boom of 75mm guns firing, the crack of German 88s, the staccato of machine guns. The battle raged for 3 hours. Turner sat in that basement listening, unable to see what was happening but able to hear it. He heard Tank 31's engine note change pitch and knew the crew was having to adjust for the track tension issue he'd warned about. He heard Tank 47 firing rapidly and winced, hoping the stressed engine would hold. He heard Tank 53's turret traverse motor working, the distinctive whine audible even through the chaos, and felt a grim satisfaction that his repair was holding. Around 11:30 a.m., the German attack broke. The American tanks, positioned in good defensive positions with clear fields of fire, had held. 3 German tanks were burning wrecks. The infantry assault had been beaten back with heavy losses. The Germans withdrew to their original positions. The battalion had held, and in holding, they'd maintained control of the crossroads and prevented the Germans from using that route for supply. Late that afternoon, relief finally came. The 4th Armored Division broke through from the south, and suddenly the battalion wasn't surrounded anymore. Fresh supplies, fresh ammunition, fresh troops, and with them came a full maintenance company with proper equipment. They took one look at the 3 tanks Turner had brought back from the dead and shook their heads in amazement. "Who the hell did these repairs?" one of the maintenance officers asked. "These are the most janky field expedient fixes I've ever seen." Captain Reeves, standing nearby, smiled. That would be Sergeant Turner. He did them in 9 hours, in the dark, under fire. The maintenance officer whistled. "These tanks shouldn't be running. By any reasonable standard, these repairs shouldn't work. And yet," Reeves said, "they do. And 600 men are alive because they do." Turner got a Bronze Star for that night's work, though he didn't think he deserved it. In his mind, he'd just done his job. The medal citation talked about extraordinary heroism and exemplary dedication to duty under fire. Turner read it once and stuffed it in his duffel bag. What mattered to him was simpler. 3 tanks that shouldn't have run had run. Men who should have died had lived. That was the only measure of success that meant anything to a mechanic. The 3rd Armored Division kept pushing east. Turner stayed with them, keeping tanks running through frozen German forests and across the Rhine. Billy Crawford got hit by shrapnel 2 weeks later, but survived, went home to that farm in Georgia. Red O'Shea made it all the way to Berlin, went back to Boston, opened an electrical shop. Eddie Matsumoto, well, Eddie spent 2 more years in the Army after the war helping rebuild Japan, then finally got that welding shop in L.A. he'd always wanted. They all wrote to Turner for a while. Then life took over, the way it does, and the letters got further apart. Turner came home to Akron in '45, married a girl named Dorothy, who worked at the Goodyear plant, had 3 kids, opened a garage on East Market Street, Turner's Automotive Repair. He fixed Buicks and Chevys and Fords, did good work, charged fair prices, didn't talk much. The Bronze Star sat in a drawer somewhere. When people asked about the war, he'd just say he was a mechanic, nothing special, and change the subject. 32 years later, on a hot July afternoon in 1976, a Cadillac pulled up outside Turner's garage. Turner was underneath a '72 Ford pickup, replacing a starter, when he heard someone call, "Excuse me, is Joe Turner here?" "That's me," Turner said, sliding out from under the truck. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, and found himself looking at a man about his age, well dressed in a business suit, with silver hair and a familiar face that Turner couldn't quite place. "Sergeant Turner?" the man asked. "Just Joe these days. Can I help you with something?" The man smiled, and suddenly Turner recognized him. Lieutenant Morrison from Baker Company. He'd been a tank commander, one of the guys who'd taken Tank 53 into battle that morning in December '44. He looked older now, they all did, but the eyes were the same. "Lieutenant Morrison," Turner said, surprised. "I'll be damned." "It's Frank." "I haven't been a lieutenant in 30 years. Morrison stuck out his hand, and Turner shook it. "I was passing through Akron on business. Took me 2 days to track you down. Wanted to stop by, say something I should have said a long time ago." "You don't need to say anything," Turner started, but Morrison held up his hand. "Joe, I was in that turret when the Germans came, Tank 53, the one you fixed in, what was it, 90 minutes, 2 hours? However long it was, it shouldn't have been possible. But you did it anyway." Morrison's voice got quiet. "There were 4 of us in that tank. Driver, loader, gunner, and me. We all made it home, got married, had kids. Those kids have kids now. My oldest grandson just graduated from Ohio State." He paused. "None of that happens if you don't fix that turret that night. You understand what I'm saying?" Turner didn't know what to say. He just nodded. "There's 18 of us left from Baker Company," Morrison continued. "We get together every few years. Fewer of us each time, you know how it goes. But whenever we meet up, we tell stories. And one story we always tell is about the mechanic who worked miracles in the snow. The guy who wouldn't quit even when the officers were ready to surrender. Joe, you saved 600 men that night, you know that, right?" "I fixed 3 tanks," Turner said quietly. "That's all I did, fix 3 tanks." "Yeah, you did." Morrison looked at the garage, at the tools hanging on the pegboard, at the truck sitting with its hood up. "Still fixing things, huh? It's what I know how to do." Morrison smiled. "Next reunion's in October down in Louisville. I'd be honored if you'd come. The boys would love to see you. Half of them don't believe you're real. They think we made you up." Turner thought about it. He'd never been to a reunion, never wanted to go back to that. But looking at Morrison's face, seeing the genuine gratitude there, he found himself nodding. "Maybe I will. If I can get away from the shop. Bring your wife. Bring your family. Everyone wants to meet the man who—" Morrison stopped, started over. "Everyone wants to meet you, Joe, that's all." They talked for a few more minutes, exchanged addresses, shook hands again. Morrison climbed back in his Cadillac and drove off. Turner stood in the hot July sun, watching the car disappear down East Market Street, and found himself thinking about that December night for the first time in years. Billy Crawford and his Georgia drawl. Red O'Shea's bad jokes. Eddie Matsumoto's steady hands. The sound of frozen metal and the smell of burned oil. The way his hands had hurt so bad he couldn't feel them anymore. And he thought about all those tanks, 12, 16, 22, 31, 47, 53, and how they'd been nothing but metal and mechanical systems, broken parts that needed fixing. No different, really, from the Ford truck sitting in his garage right now. You looked at what was broken, you figured out how to fix it, you did the work. That's all he'd ever done. That's all he knew how to do. Turner went back to work on the truck. The starter needed replacing, and Mrs. Henderson needed her pickup by 5 o'clock. Some things didn't change. There was always something that needed fixing, and someone had to do it. Might as well be him. He never did make it to that reunion in Louisville. His youngest daughter's wedding was the same weekend, and family came first. But he started writing letters again to Morrison and some of the other guys from Baker Company. Not long letters. Just checking in, seeing how everyone was doing, sharing news. And every Christmas, without fail, he'd get cards from men he'd never met. Sons and grandsons and great-grandsons of the guys who'd been in those tanks that morning. "My father said you're the reason I exist." Thank you. Turner would read them, file them away in a shoebox in the closet, and never mention them to anyone. What was there to say? He'd just been doing his job, fixing what was broken, making sure the machines kept running. That's all it ever was.